Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
At 154, what can we expect from Spence, facing Crawford?
You'll see him, he won't be so drained, he won't be so depleted or whatever. I mean, you'll see, that wasn't the issue, you know what I'm saying? Crawford fought a good fight. He had a great game plan, right? And so, give it to him by his coach. So it's not like, he was the better guy that day. That's right.
That was a refreshingly honest take from Coach Derek James, Errol Spence Jr.'s longtime trainer, who isn't chalking it all up to Errol being depleted or being weight drained. The game plan in and of itself has more to do with the victory than the weight itself. The punches that Errol Spence Jr. was open for at 147 are the same punches that he will be open for at 154, which begs the question, if that's the case and there's not much hope of success in a rematch going straight into one, why is he doing it? Why? And to me, he just seems like a fighter that's ready to go, ready to cash out one last hoorah before he calls it a career. I don't really think Errol has that much more to give the sport of boxing. And it was 1 or 2 years ago that Errol himself stated he could have retired after the car accident, that he was here for a good time, but not a long one. That adequately sums up what we're seeing here and now, him having activated this rematch clause. Try and understand. Errol isn't a bad fighter. He's not a bad boxer. He's just a simple one. A textbook boxer puncher with a textbook style that's easy for the spectators to appreciate, but also easy for Terence Crawford to read, easy to counteract. Errol was a good boxer puncher. He wasn't unified champion for no reason, but his strategy relies on him being bigger and stronger than the other man. Bigger and stronger and able to overwhelm the other man with volume, whereas Terence... You see a lot of broad strokes from Errol Spence Jr. Photo finish punches, big ones. And for Terence, these broad strokes are countering opportunities. Little more than countering opportunities. Errol is a more flat-footed fighter than Terence Crawford. Terence is better at managing the distance and moving into and out of position. He's a sharper puncher than Errol Spence Jr. I've been saying that for years. And his movements are a lot shorter, more subtle, more layered than Errol Spence Jr.'s approach. Errol really only has one way of fighting a fight and only one gear. That forward momentum in tandem with Terence's counter-punching. Errol's always coming forward, stepping into his jab, but he's a lot more flat-footed than Terence Crawford. Thus, it's easier for Terence to manage that distance and catch him on the way in. Catch him hard. That's what we saw. And there is no advantage for Errol Spence Jr. at 154 pounds that Terence Crawford doesn't also benefit from. That if what you're hoping is that Errol will be a little bit more energized and a little bit more durable at that weight, the same applies to Terence. There's no advantage in it that Terence doesn't also benefit from. TGB Promotions, which is just another way of saying PBC, has 2 dates set aside in the month of February early next year. I'm going to assume that one of them is the Spence versus Crawford rematch, though there's no word yet as to who is going to distribute that pay-per-view. That's approximately 3 to 4 months out. You're talking about the month of November, the month of December, the month of January, going into February. There's ample time there for that news to break. We know that Al is in the market for a new broadcast partner. I don't know what this thing is going to do at the box office, but if I had to guess, it will do less than the first fight did. It was too one-sided. There is no mystique and very little left to the imagination. Even if there are some that are still holding out hope that Errol can turn things around, for me and my money, at this stage, at this age, and given who he's been fight by fight leading up to this fight, the likelihood that he can change is unlikely. He's a good fighter, but a very simple fighter. Easy for Terence to understand. And the added chip on his shoulder he's gonna have from the first fight, having destroyed Errol in the first one, it may make it even easier to do in the second, because now he's been in there with him, he knows his man, and he knows what to do, what he's susceptible to. The beating that Errol Spence Jr. took earlier this year is a career-altering beating. It's the kind of beating that you don't come back the same guy after that fight. Hard to throw with the same conviction as before, because everything you threw at him in that fight got you countered, got you pasted. And I feel like Errol handled his loss with dignity, more dignity than his fans who polarized this fight for many years. Errol Spence Jr. himself took his beating like a man and took the loss like a man, handled himself with dignity. But none of that is going to help him in a rematch.
He'll lose that one too, and he may lose worse than the first fight. In the first fight, the referee stopped it. In the next one, he might get put to sleep.
I don't have any illusions about that. And if the beating that he takes in the second fight is akin to the one that he took in the first, that may be the end. That may be his last stand. There are no other big money fights at 154 or 160 for him. And after 2 systematic beatings, I don't think he'll have much left to give the sport. So this could very well be the last stand of Errol Spence Jr.
A fight that everyone is looking forward to and hope it happens. And, you know, I'm doing everything in my power to make it happen, and I'm referring to it as the Anthony Joshua fight. So, Anthony, giving it from my mouth here, personally, you know, from the horse's mouth himself. Hey, I'm here, I'm ready to go. I heard some things about what your promoter said that my last fight only lasted a short period of time, that I ain't fought in a year, and he don't know if I want to fight or not. But I'm letting you know right now, right here, I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to get in that ring, man. Let's make this the best time of our lives. This would be a major disaster if we would never be able to get in the ring and put our stamp down in history, bro. You know what I mean? When people would think about classic and great fights, I want them to think about us as well, you know, and being able to do that, we got to get in the ring, you know, and that's just what it's all about. You know, the silliest thing I've heard is people saying that you're not ready, and that's the silliest thing, because I don't believe that. I believe you're ready. I hope you're ready. I think you're ready. Let's make this happen, bro. Me and you, make the history happen. I'm looking forward to seeing your response, bro. I'll talk to you soon. Love, peace, God bless.
Deontay Wilder is a lot more cordial these days than he used to be. In my previous video, we talked about this PSA, this public service announcement to Anthony Joshua, that Deontay is very much willing and able to fight, and he's just waiting on them. Though with the Saudis having pulled the funding from the fight, it's not worth the same money that it used to be. And Anthony doesn't want to hold up his career over Deontay anymore. When this fight mattered the most, it was Deontay dragging his feet, and a lot of people like to be disingenuous about that, but that's the truth.
When he claimed that $12.5 million was a lowball offer, even though it was many times more than what he was making at that time. I think Wilder's highest purse at the time was something like $2 million. They offered you 6 times your highest purse. You didn't take it.
You start carrying on about a $50 million offer, what was a $50 million email that was supposed to be bankrolled by none other than Frank Warren, by none other than BT Sport in the UK, where Anthony can't fight anyway.
The first I heard of it today was that you were privy to that due to a wanting from BT to potentially put the Wilder-Joshua fight on BT, the fact that Team Wilder or Shelley Finkel were buying the rights to the fight. I didn't know that. Explain how that side of things works.
Well, that's what they were doing. They offered the the guarantee of the 50 and the 30 on the strength of buying the rights to put the fight on. Now,
The Americans didn't know it then because they weren't as familiar with the British boxing scene as many of them are now. How ridiculous a proposition this was. Hey, let's go ahead and involve BT Sport, where Anthony can't fight anyway. Let's ask them for the money, hoping that he will accept it, even though he's exclusively contracted to Sky Sports, where he boxes exclusively. That even if your $50 million offer was real, he's not legally at liberty to accept it anyway. But this was the story 5 years ago.
What would have been the American equivalent? That would have been like if a Golden Boy Promotions fighter went to Top Rank for the money to finance a fight with a PBC fighter. Why the fuck would you do that?
Hindsight being 2020, the situation between Team Wilder and Team AJ was a lot less convoluted in those days because DAZN had not yet debuted in America, Matchroom didn't yet have a U.S. broadcast partner to complicate things, so the fight was more negotiable in those days. Wilder, the $50 million email, that goes on for a while. Then Wilder says he's accepted Anthony's offer, receives a contract to do the fight, at which point he sits on the contract for over a week. The WBA get tired of waiting on him
because there was already an overdue mandatory in Alexander Povetkin, who had already stepped aside once to allow Joshua versus Parker. He was willing to step aside again for Joshua versus Wilder, but Wilder received the contract, sits on it for a week, the WBA gets tired of waiting, and they subsequently order the fight.
Wilder's rationale was that initial contract didn't come with a two-way rematch clause, and he wanted one. And bear in mind, Anthony Joshua was the clear A-side by a country mile, but that was Wilder's rationale. So afterwards, the people at Matchroom make him yet another offer. This one with a two-way rematch clause, a transatlantic rematch clause. $15 million guaranteed at about 35%. He didn't like it. They make him another offer, $15 million guaranteed at 40%, close to 50%. Two-way rematch clause. He doesn't accept it.
By this time, he's already fought Fury once, their fight was scored a draw, and in his mind, fighting Fury again was more important than fighting Anthony Joshua for Undisputed.
And bear in mind that this is all before DAZN even comes into it. This is all before they have that sit-down meeting at DAZN with John Skipper and are offered $100 million to box Anthony Joshua on their platform. And once again, Deontay Wilder rejected their advances, rejected their offer. If this fight hasn't happened yet, you know who to blame.
And if you didn't before, you do now. So many still in denial about this, some still claiming that the money he was offered wasn't for Anthony Joshua.
If you can believe that, there are still a few people out there holding to that narrative. Deontay Wilder himself admitted what he was offered was for Anthony Joshua, and not only that, it was for more money than he stood to make with Fury. He made the decision that he made, and that's why he finds himself in this predicament, to where he doesn't want to put his body, his 37 or 38-year-old body, through another camp for any other guy. He's saving himself for a big payday that may not come.
He made his bed, he's got to lie in it. And no revisionist version of history is going to change that. Those are the facts by the numbers. That's the paper trail.
His marquee value, whatever buzz he had, has since dissipated, and that's evident in the box office numbers for his last fight, the Hellenius fight. A paltry $75,000 in a country this size. The only people still talking up Deontay Wilder are Fury fans.
And they're only talking up Wilder to make Fury look good for having beaten him. They're not fans of Wilder.
In a word, Wilder screwed the pooch. Under the advice of his advisor, Al Heyman, he was advised to prioritize a Fury fight, and he got what he got. The rest is history. You should have did it then. You should have had the fight when you had the chance, when you were an unbeaten champion, but you chose what you chose.
I don't know what you expect.
If Anthony doesn't want to hold up his career anymore dealing with you, I can hardly blame him. Contrary to some rumors that were circulating earlier this week, it appears that Anthony is still training with Derek James. As Deontay Wilder's trainer says, fighters have been turning down $4 million paydays, and that's a tragedy.
But I find it a little hard to believe that you guys have been searching high and low for an opponent, that you're offering these guys that are out there $4 million and they're saying no?
The risk-reward calculus to fight Deontay Wilder apparently does not check out for many fighters, even when a potential $4 million windfall is to be had. According to Wilder's trainer, Malik Scotch, Wilder, the former titleist from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, has not fought since knocking out Robert Hellenius a year ago, which was itself a rebound fight after his brutal knockout loss to Tyson Fury in the final leg of their trilogy in 2021. Wilder was seemingly headed for a showdown with Andy Ruiz and then Anthony Joshua this year, but both fights have thus far failed to materialize. Wilder and Scotch have publicly ridiculed Ruiz for scuttling their negotiations by demanding a payday well out of the line. When you're the hardest puncher in the history of the sport, it's very hard for guys to want to fight you, Scotch told FightHype.com. I'm gonna say a number, $4 million. Can you believe that? Fighters would rather stay poor than make 4 million. That's a tragedy. They would rather ask for 15 or 20 million, knowing it's not on the table, but they would rather ask for that. It's insane, man. You've got to understand it because their life is on the line. It really is. Deontay, he's just one of those fighters, he can literally cut your switch off completely with just one shot. And that's something that most fighters don't want to face. That specimen. They'd rather talk like it and draw attention to their name from it, but they do not really want to fight him.
I can believe that Andy Ruiz priced himself out of the fight. That bit of it I can believe, but what I can't believe is that you guys are searching high and low for an opponent and you can't find one.
If what you're saying is that you've got $4 million to play and $4 million to pay someone, pay them to fight with you. I don't think you offered Frankie Sanchez that kind of money, because if you did, I think he would have took the fight. Luis Ortiz really wanted to fight him. That's why he fought him twice. Ortiz really thought he could beat him. Tyson Fury really thought he could beat him. That's why he fought a trilogy with him. You get what I'm trying to say? So we know the ones that really want to fight Deontay and the ones that are just trying to have their name attached to his so they can bring in more commercial, more marketing to themselves, and yet Deontay is in need of some marketing. His last box office fight didn't sell anything. 75,000 pay-per-view buys in a country this size. 75,000. That's a far cry from what you did with Fury.
You're telling me that you couldn't find anybody in the heavyweight division willing to fight you for $4 million, or is it that you didn't talk to everybody? You've really only got one or two guys in mind.
Really, just one, and I think that's Andy. All of this inactivity doesn't favor an aging heavyweight in his late 30s who hasn't fought in over a year's time. It doesn't help his sharpness, his speed, his reflexes, his timing, which Wilder relies on to land that big right hand. It doesn't help his marquee value either, that the last time we saw you, you didn't sell anything. And that was a while ago, over a year.
Like I said, I can believe that Andy priced himself out of the fight, but I don't think these guys are really trying, not really. That this entire calendar year, you couldn't find anybody to fight you, but you had $4 million to pay.
$4 million to play to make matters worse. Showtime is out of boxing now, so where would a Deontay Wilder fight take place at this point in the juncture? Who would be the broadcaster?
This inactivity, it doesn't help his ability to fight or sell fights, because out of sight, out of mind, my friend.
The virtue of staying active isn't just staying sharp, but also staying talked about.
Yeah, we're talking about you, but what we're talking about is how you ain't fighting.
None of this helps his situation.